I'm Glenn Solomon from GGV Capital. I'm one of the managing partners here, and really excited today to be hosting a webinar on category creation. This is a topic that we get asked about a lot, and as many of you know, we've been hosting a number of masterclass webinars since we all entered work from home mode, and this is a topic that we're really excited to have one on. We've had some great webinars, but I think today is going to take the cake. No pressure, Barr and Nick, but we have two amazing guests, and it's an awesome topic. With Barr, I'm going to ask each of the guests to introduce themselves in a second, but rest assured that Barr Moses, founder and CEO of Monte Carlo, is up to some really interesting stuff. And Nick Mehta, CEO of Gainsight, has also built a really interesting company in a novel category. It's great that we have a mix of stages, I think. Barr's company, Monte Carlo, is quite early in the journey. And Nick's company, Gainsight, is much further along in more of a growth mode, advanced growth mode. And to add intrigue to the event today, Barr used to work at Gainsight for Nick, so I'm expecting good stories both ways during the event today, and I'll be disappointed if we don't hear some really good singers. Just for everybody listening in, there's a Q&A bar, so if you have a question you'd like us to address during the webinar, just type it into the Q&A and we'll do our best to get to it. And also there will be an email that goes around to everybody who attended, and I'm going to give it away. We're going to offer up Nick's book behind him, the Customer Success Economy, which maybe you could say a word or two about at the end, Nick. And also Barr from Monte Carlo has the Data Downtime Handbook, which is an ebook that will be available. So there'll be a lot of more content coming to you after this event. So without further ado, I'd really love to get started. Barr, maybe I could ask you to begin just with a little bit of an introduction to yourself and your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Definitely excited. It's a real pleasure to be here with you too. So yeah, I'm Barr. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo is a data reliability company. So we're focused on helping enterprise companies reduce data downtime and increase trust in their data. We're named after the simulation, not the location, in case anyone was wondering. My background is in math and statistics, and I was really fortunate, as Glenn mentioned, before Monte Carlo to work at Gainsight for Nick and to sort of be part of the customer success category story, which was definitely a very important part of the inspiration for starting Monte Carlo. Yeah, really looking forward to the discussion today.
Great, thanks, Barr. All right, Nick. Same question for you. Can you give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and your company?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the most notable thing about me is I got to work with Barr Moses at some point. So that was that's my little piece of trivia that people remember me for. But I'm the CEO of Gainsight. Been running Gainsight for about the past 7.5 years, and I think many people probably know us, but high level is we're trying to help businesses do a better job driving success for their customers across their whole company, from the way that they build their products, to the way they sell to them, to the way they manage a customer success post-sale. And we build a suite of products that helps drive customer centricity across the company. We have a product that helps you analyze how people are using your product and drive adoption. We have a product that helps you drive kind of customer success and scale it. And then we have a product that helps you improve renewal rates and drive expansion.
Great. Awesome. Well, renewal rates are a hot topic in most boardrooms these days in the pandemic. So, first question I wanted to ask both you guys, maybe Barr, I'll start with you. Can you just tell us about that, the inspiration you had to start Monte Carlo? Was there a moment where, kind of sparks flew and the rainbow came up and you're like, okay, I got it. This is what I want to do. Or was it more of a gradual, hey, I'm seeing a problem here, I want to start a company, and yeah, there's no company in this category. In fact, it's not really a category, but I feel compelled, I've got to go do this. Maybe talk a little bit about that inspiration and what led you to decide to start the company.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely a series of moments. Probably I'll separate into sort of two different parts of the journey. The first is where actually at Gainsight, I was really fortunate to work with some of the best companies and the most forward-thinking companies on actually how to leverage data for renewals, for customer success, for all that good stuff. And just realize that building data products is really, really hard. And that in many ways, sort of the data industry has a lot to catch up on. There was this kind of like tension I saw where companies on the one hand really wanted to get data driven, really wanted to make use of their data. They were all excited about it. There was this like big rush to get data driven. But then sort of when the rubber met the road, it was really kind of around some fundamentals. And I noticed that data reliability is really important. And personally at Gainsight, I actually, I led a team called Gainsight on Gainsight, so GONG for short. And we were doing a lot of sort of data and analytics internally. And making sure that that data was reliable was really important to me. And I remember working with Nick on that and with other folks on the team, and I was like, we need to get our data right. And so that was one kind of like just personal experiences with that. And then actually when I left Gainsight, I interviewed over 100 or so data teams and specifically asked them like, what's keeping you up at night? What's like your biggest pain point? What are you most afraid of? When do you get nervous during your day? Like what's the worst day for you in your job? And so from that, I just realized that it's really an industry-wide problem, one that people really, really care deeply about, and one that I think hasn't been thought about enough and hasn't been met with the diligence that it really deserves. And so that sort of really inspired me to understand that there's a deep problem and also understand that there's sort of there is a solution, and I got really excited about that solution.
That's really cool. Didn't realize that you had so thoroughly canvass the market. So you felt the problem yourself and then checked with 100 of your peers in the market to see if it was not just you, but a problem that was out there being felt more uniformly.
Yeah, definitely. Both peers and actually people that I didn't know at all. So lots of cold calls and making sure that I'm talking to people who, just really interviewing them and really understanding their pain points. So yeah, it was definitely a combination of both of those.
One thing I've heard a lot is that when you're trying to build a category, I think Steve Jobs has talked about sometimes, the customer doesn't even know what they want. You sort of have to lead them there. Given that, data reliability was not a category, and when you're having these 100 or so conversations, was it obvious, and were people telling you what they needed, or did you have to kind of take the comments and lead them a little bit on a journey to where you thought they should go?
Great question. So I will say that actually I worked on a few ideas in parallel, which was really good because it helped me give me a good benchmark. And some ideas that I worked on, like literally nobody cared. Like I would call them and they were like, yeah, like I don't have time for this. And I was like, okay, that's not a great idea. And there isn't anything here. And then when I was talking about this problem, people got so excited and they wanted to spend so much time with me. And they were willing to like open up their company and their team and their time to spend on this. And that was not normal. And that made me more and more excited. And so I think that was one sort of first signal. And then, specifically on kind of customers' ability to articulate sort of their pains and needs. There isn't anyone that's better. And by the way, I learned this from customer success, right? So I learned this from Nick. There isn't anyone that's better than customers to describe their pain. And it's real. And when people start like sweating on a call, that's when you know that like they're really describing the pain. And so that was probably the thing that like was most insightful. And that sort of started actually this process. And later on, sort of crafting the solution, that was on us to come and to use sort of
Got it.
As the philosophy and come back to customers with it.
Interesting. So pain is something people can describe. The solution, that the way to solve that pain, that's where the creativity and ingenuity has to come in. Interesting. Nick, similar question for you. Like your origin stories with Gainsight are a little bit different. You did not found the company, but you joined as CEO very early on. So you had to make a bet. You could have done a lot of different things, and obviously, the company, I'm assuming at that time, had decided it was going to focus on customer success. But I'm sure you saw a lot of opportunity to continue to evolve that model. Like, tell us a little bit about what that calculus was like and how you got yourself comfortable that there was a market to go create here.
Yeah, totally. And it is a little bit of a different story for a variety of reasons. One of the biggest ones being that, we actually sell to a whole new job in a whole new industry. So there's all these new things about what we've been doing. My story is that, and Barr's heard this before, I kind of started my career in the enterprise software world. And my dad was actually an entrepreneur that worked in like tech a long time ago, but with that old model where you sell stuff and you can kind of move on to the next customer and they buy it up front or they install it. And so that idea that you just didn't need to focus that much on the post-sale world was kind of, as you know, Glenn, like that's the whole world before cloud, right? Yep. And that was my background was I'd seen that old world. And then I went to run my first SaaS company, a company called Live Office, which an investor brought me in to run. And I came in with the old school playbook. This is 2008 of like sales and engineering. But then I figured out that I was spending half my time on our existing customers. Like whether I liked it or not, that's just what I had to do as a CEO. Are they going to renew with us? Are they happy? Are they going to expand? Are they at risk of leaving? All that kind of stuff. And so I just saw that like all my time as a CEO of a cloud company was going into my customer base, not just my new customers. And I saw something needed to change. The other thing I saw in my last company was we had systems to help us market to our customers, to sell to them, to build software. And we had nothing, like literally our system for managing customers was a big spreadsheet, just like everyone else's, right? And so those ideas kind of got me, I guess.
Which is wild. That's wild because like, when you think about it, most of your revenue is coming from your existing accounts.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. And I was, I was in 2008 or I was like, somebody should start a company around this area. And then, but it turned out that there was two guys, our two founders, Jim Everlin and Sridhar Pedaneni, who had this idea. They'd run another SaaS company. They had this idea. And it was just one of those serendipitous Silicon Valley moments. I just sold my last company, this company Live Office. I was an EIR at a venture firm, trying to figure out what I want to do next. A friend of mine at another venture firm had just met these two entrepreneurs. They had basically a PowerPoint idea, 6 beta customers signed up. And I just said, I fell in love with the idea. It was a super early stage company, much earlier than I planned to go do. But I just thought, okay, this is probably going to be the future. And obviously here we are. So lots of stuff in the middle, but that's how we got started.
Interesting. So, one thing that I hear routinely from folks who are starting companies of any type, but certainly when you're creating a new category, trying to innovate, is there's always, there's a ton of doubters out there. And obviously your job is to, in some ways, to counteract the doubters. And two areas where that doubting can really come into play, I think, is when you're trying to raise money and when you're trying to hire people, and get them to share your vision so they'll come along with you on the ride. I'm curious how you dealt with that in the early days. Maybe Nick, I'll start with you. How did you convince both the VC community and sort of great potential employees like Barr that don't worry, there really is going to be a business we can build here. I know you've never heard of this category. This isn't CRM, but we can make this happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. First of all, I think key is naming the category well. So we named it customer success, and you can't be against that. You can't be against customer. It's like the way Congress names bills that they're always like, we care about our children's bill or something, right? You can't be against that we care about our children's bill. Can't be against customer success. That's the starting point, is a good name. For us, I think that it's interesting. The early days of like fundraising were easy actually, because I think people saw, okay, in their own companies, they had all these companies, SaaS companies that had retention as a big priority, and they were seeing the same thing. So every one of our investors invested because they saw this problem in their company. So it wasn't actually too challenging. There's the natural questions about how big is the market, and what about the big players and when they come into the space or whatever. And those questions, by the way, always exist, I think, in new categories. So nothing different than normal. So it wasn't too hard. I think it was also easier just being candid, because I'd done one company before, and I think you get an unfair advantage the second time around, whether it's deserved or not. That sort of just happens. I think getting people, so if fundraising wasn't too challenging, getting employees, I think what ended up happening for us was we became extremely values driven and purpose driven from the beginning. And therefore it was much more about, less about like, we want to go chase this employee, is more about honestly, who believes in what we're doing, and who can we get that is going to be here for the long term and really believes in like this mission we have and all that. I think one tactical thing that happens with employees is you hire one person and that person has a good network and they're great at recruiting. And obviously, like, we hired Allison Pickens, who was our COO, and Allison brought in Barr and like a ton of other amazing people that are, many are still at Gainsight now. So the other thing that we did early on, by the way, was we have a very non-Bay Area strategy in general. We have 75 people plus or minus in the Bay Area, but out of 700. So we have lots of people in India. We have an amazing office in St. Louis, Missouri. And so I think that's another thing that we had, which was kind of an advantage for us, is like, we're never going to be the biggest company in Silicon Valley by any means, but, we can be one of the most meaningful tech companies in, St. Louis, or maybe the best startup to work for in Hyderabad, as examples.
Hey, maybe just an off-road question. Didn't realize you guys were so distributed.
Yeah.
Do you think that's helped in the pandemic, now that everyone's even probably fully remote or has been fully remote at times?
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's massive. This whole thing has been, there's the issues we all have to still deal with, like, being parents of young kids in school, those don't go away no matter who you are. But the coordination over Zoom, like for us, it's really not been a big issue at all. Because of the fact that we've always had a distributed model. As Barr knows, Barr managed people in India and St. Louis and probably other places as well. So
interesting. Very cool. Barr, how about you, being earlier on in the journey, what's it been like, both with the venture community and also, as you've been trying to build out the early parts of your team?
Yeah, so I'll start with the team. And actually, the reason that I joined Gainsight, there were sort of two main reasons. One was the people, like Allison and Nick. I just wanted to work with the team. They were awesome. And two was I was excited about creating a category. Like, that was really appealing to me. So I think in a sense, like, there's some self-selection. If you're really clear about your mission, what you want to do, you attract the right people. And you need those people who are excited about that. And who are excited about sort of doing this thing that kind of seems impossible, but actually, like, there's a lot of magic in it. And I wanted to see that magic, and I wanted to be part of that journey. Like that was my main motivation. And so I think sort of staying true to that, not trying to be something for everyone, but something for the people who want to be part of that journey has really helped. And I think that's true for fundraising too, and for investors. You need people who believe in the mission, who believe in you, and believe in sort of what you think the world will look like. I think there's kind of two other things that helped, or sort of that helped at least for me. One is having sort of a very strong internal conviction about this. So for me, like, when I imagine sort of the space or kind of the world in 5 or 10 years from now, I just can't imagine a world where this doesn't exist. And I think this was the same for customer success when I joined. Like, it just seems inevitable. You just can't imagine waking up and not having something like this. And having that internal conviction is like really important for everything, for fundraising, for team, for customers. And then I think the second thing is actually anchoring in something else that is sort of familiar to folks. So for example, for us, kind of data downtime is a totally new concept, but application downtime is a very familiar thing that everybody's sort of well aware of, and it's sort of a established, very large market. And so when you kind of draw that corollary, or kind of help bring that into the picture, that helps kind of, helps people empathize with it and sort of see the vision that you're going after. So having that anchor, I found, has helped.
Well, I just build on that, by the way, because those are two awesome points, Barr. Like for us, the anchoring that's really, really helped in the early days in particular was, hey, in the old world, you had this kind of funnel of marketing and sales and customers. In the new world, so much of your revenue comes from your customers. And, Marketo and HubSpot and other companies built big businesses around marketing. And obviously Salesforce built a big business around sales, and Gainsight for customer success. That definitely became the kind of formula, and not just us saying it, but investors, everyone else. And I thought the belief point you made, Barr, is awesome. Like, honestly, like, it is hard creating a category. Like, it is really, really hard. It's been like, I've done thousands of webinars and met 5,000 companies and like done many sales cycles that went nowhere. And it's hard. There's no way to window dress it. And the thing that keeps me going is saying, in the future, like what drives customer success is two things: customers getting more power, and vendors having more data that they could use to be more proactive about them. And I think to myself, in the future, will there be customers that have more or less power? Obviously more power. Will vendors have more or less data? Obviously more data. So why shouldn't we be big? Like what's holding us back? And that's what I tell myself every time I get down on, oh my God, it's so hard. Because it is hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know after the big Steelers loss, you're going to be
exactly
repeating
right.
those two things to yourself.
That's really the barometer.
Great. Well, and Barr, how about with as you've talked to potential investors, do you ever hear? And there's a question came in from one of the attendees about like, you hear like, hey, is this market big enough? Like doubts around just the overall market size and how you've addressed that.
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a few things that we looked at. I mean, first of all, if you look at the data space more broadly in the last few years, like there's been some major acquisitions in the space, a lot of movements, Tableau, Looker. There's also been a lot of investment in the space. And so I think in the early days, you're kind of betting on a market. And I was betting that this market is one that there will be a lot of innovation that I think we can win in. So that's one, like, when you're very, very early, like that's really the bet, the market. And so if you think the market is large enough, you have to convince yourself that it is. But if you think, that's kind of the proof point. And then the second is maybe going back to sort of what Nick said a little bit. My things that you have to believe in order to believe that this is a big problem is that data will become more important to every company and that every single company will need data to run their businesses. I just can't imagine a world where that's not going to be the case, right? So in a sense, like every single company will need data to run their operations, and this is only going to get bigger and more important, and really are betting on that growth. And so I think those are the things that we like notice in the market, and combining that with very like a personal experience with customers, their strong reaction, and that early traction helped us kind of understand that. Sort of the size of the market and the opportunity.
So you've both talked about the importance of having your own sort of belief and relying and kind of turning to that when things are grim, and using that kind of as motivation and reminder as to why you're doing this crazy thing called trying to start a company, particularly in a new category. How much of your time as a company leader are you spending on pure evangelism? Because, I would imagine if you start, if either one of you was running like a CRM company competing with Salesforce, but just with some like new approach, you wouldn't be evangelizing the category. You may have to be doing other things, but that's not going to be part of what makes you successful. In this case, I'm curious how much of your time you just have to be out talking to the press, talking to potential partners, potential employees, existing employees, customers, prospects, just about what this category is all about. Maybe Barr, can I ask you?
Sure. Yeah. So honestly, in the beginning, I think it's like the only thing that matters. I mean, creating a category is really hard and it takes time and it takes a village. And so, I think, I remember like working for Nick, it always felt like Nick was everywhere. And, I think that was like, and then customer success became everywhere. Right. And a little bit, and that's, I think, where the magic is. And so I think in sort of the early days, spending a lot of that time is very important. We actually haven't publicly launched yet, so we're not quite talking with the press yet, but we create a lot of content. We speak a lot. We talk about the importance of the category, of the problem. And that's stuff that people can resonate today. Like that has nothing to do with the company. That's the category itself.
Yeah, I can speak on that too. I do think it's just such a big part of the job. Just as a fun anecdote, it's not always exactly this way, but this morning, this is my 4th virtual event. If you can believe it. I started at 7. I think one point I just make in general about this whole thing, it ties to the market size question too. Barr knows I'm like on the side, I'm like a super like science geek and nerdy about physics and things like that. And there's this basic difference between what people call classical physics and quantum physics, which is in classical physics, we think the world exists and we just observe it. Whatever happens in the world exists, whether we're there or not. And in quantum physics, there's this weird thing that like we affect the world, like
Yes.
you observe an experiment. And I actually think markets and software are like quantum physics. It's like, it's not that there's this fixed market out there and how big is your market and what's your market size. And that's it. It's actually that entrepreneurs affect the market by reshaping it. CRM is not the market it is without Mark Benioff. Mark Benioff defined that CRM should include the contact center and marketing automation and Tableau and MuleSoft. Are all those things part of CRM? Well, Mark Benioff made them part of CRM. You know, and I think that that's something people underrate, is the entrepreneur's ability through their ambition and vision and their evangelism to make the market what it is. Markets aren't given to you; you kind of make them, I think.
That's a great point. And so you're the quantum physicist constantly making that market.
Trying to, yeah.
Great. So one of the things that we know is super hard for any company, certainly any company selling to business, any company in the enterprise or mid-market or SMB space, as opposed to the consumer space, is kind of convincing first customers to come on board and you know, take a bet on a startup. And I would imagine that, you know, it's even harder in a world where there's no budget. It isn't clear who the, you know, champion's going to be, because the category is new and you're trying to help both create the category, convince people it exists, and then also convince a customer to take a bet on you. Curious, like, kind of what lessons you could share about how you overcome those challenges, getting that, you know, that first cohort of customers to take a bet. Maybe Nick, you know, maybe you could take us back in time a little bit to those earlier days and how you were able to get that going.
Totally. And Barr probably remember some of the stories too. Yeah, it's interesting because one observation I tell entrepreneurs is there's, I think that there's certain companies with their cultures and there's certain people that tend to be early customers of young companies. And they just like if you've heard of Jeffrey Moore Crossing the Chasm, they like being those early adopters. And it's not just the people, it's actually companies. Certain kinds of companies like trying new things out. So one of the actually easiest hacks, in my opinion, to figure out where to focus is to look at who the case studies are of other companies in space on their websites. And it's highly likely the early customers of Gainsight and the early customers of Marketo and the early customers of Salesforce and the early customers of whatever are all very similar. So that's one general point. The second point is, I think we all know the people that are early, they're early customers because they want to be innovators. They want to shape things. They also want to speak about it. They want to be able to put on their LinkedIn profile. And so what can you do to actually give them a platform through events, through blogs, et cetera, to show them being an innovator? They want to like look to the world like they're an innovator. And so it's very important, the marketing that you can do for your early adopters. The third thing I'd say is once you got those people signed up, you have to deliver and work so hard. I remember Marketo was one of our early customers, still customer today. And I remember like literally we just went to their office all the time. And like if you looked at their badge system, I probably went in there 100 times. I mean, like literally all the time, navigating their internal politics, trying to make it work, have the engineers there editing the product and kind of set near real time to make it work for them, right? That's what you have to do. So you can't just get them signed up, you got to deliver.
Or you're right in the thick of it now. You know, you're having great success, even though you haven't even launched yet. But how hard has it been? And any kind of surprises one way or the other that you found so far as you've been out talking to customers?
Yeah. So definitely agree with what Nick says for sure. I think I've stalked every single customer case study and event speaker possible on the website and collected those list of people and stalked them. So 100%, that's a great technical advice. A couple of things, or how I thought about this. First of all, I realized that this was going to be like our number one, like key break it or make it as a company. And so I actually did this. So before we actually started the company, we already had design partners. I was like, we have to make sure that we have that even before, otherwise we're not going to go anywhere. And so first of all, just like started with it head on. And then second, I think kind of when you're building this category, it seems really like big and daunting, like how are we going to solve this? But if you actually like break it down into very specific, narrow pain points that every customer, or like that your target customers, like that it really clicks with them. Like for example, whenever you're in data, you for sure got a call from your manager saying that the report is wrong, or like 100% that you like had to deal with like something breaking, and then you're like, everything is like disappearing on your report and you like don't know what the numbers are. Like there isn't anyone who's not experienced that. And so when you like break it down into that very specific pain point and tackle that, in combination with just like, you know, we like found our first design partners, and then our goal was to get something in their hands just as fast as humanly possible, and then work with them to iterate it. So we were like on WhatsApp, on text, on Slack, like every means possible, like just communicating with them on like every single data problem that they ever had, really integrating ourselves into their experience. And that helped us, you know, sort of deliver pretty quickly and make them successful early on, which then leads to more design partners and more partners, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. So kind of using modern tooling to really stay close to those early champions and make sure you make them successful is sounds like a huge priority for both of you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Customer success.
Awesome. Yeah. I guess it goes back to customer success.
Everything does.
Yeah. I bet that's what the book says too. Looking forward to reading it. Okay, so the next, I want to ask you guys a little bit about, you know, in the journey here. We've talked a lot about how you're going to build momentum within your company, but when you're trying to create a category, there's a lot you need to do just beyond the four walls of your own company. To like convince the world there's a market too.
Right.
And, you know, like Nick, you've done an incredible job evangelizing customer success. I mean, I'm old enough to remember, you know, I've been doing this a while, and, you know, I can distinctly remember what org charts looked like a decade ago in software companies, and there was no VP of customer success anywhere to be found. And now I think across, you know, the 20 plus companies I'm working with, there's probably, if there's not somebody running customer success in every one of those companies right now, there's a search or a desire to drive some leadership into that position. So like, to your point about quantum physics and making markets and not just expecting them to happen, I think you've done that. And it's really remarkable, but I'm curious, like, what some of the tricks and tools and techniques you've used to create the market. It goes beyond just the company. And so to Barr's point, it seems like you're everywhere. How do you do that?
Yeah, there's a few things I think that have really helped over time. Five things that we've kind of thought have been like maybe the keys to the success on the category creation side. One is having people in the company that can credibly be the spokespeople, that have the combination of having walked in the shoes of the person you're dealing with and being excited about being an advocate and evangelist, right? So in Gainsight's lineage, in the early days, one of our first executives was Dan Steinman, who was the head of customer success at Marketo. So he'd been at a customer, he came to Gainsight, and he'd walked in the shoes of a CS leader and was very credible and is a great person, and so really connected with people. And so he did a lot of speaking. And then actually Barr's old boss, Allison, was our chief customer officer for a while, and then she became kind of a role model in the community. And over time, many people at Gainsight have been able to do this. So the first thing is kind of having somebody who can be, or a few people over time, be the evangelist, right? Obviously me being one of those as well. Number two is the idea that like events can definitely kind of catalyze that evangelism and just I think there's just some level of that. It's harder now, obviously, with the virtual thing, but you can still do great stuff virtual. And I think it's really important to bring people together. It drives that sense of like a community and all that. And, you know, we do this big conference called Pulse, and probably a lot of people have heard about it. This year was online, but it's 23,000 people. And so that we have talk a lot about that. Third kind of thing that we've found work really well is getting the content out there. Obviously blogging, things like that, but eventually maybe aspiration is, can you write a book? Like, you know, we've written 3 books at Gainsight now. It's incredibly scalable, and you get your message out to people that you don't even normally talk to. You know, probably 100 management teams have made the book a required reading for their company, like the whole company read it, you know? So the fourth thing that we found is really powerful is the on the ground evangelism. Like just, you know, every podcast, I do a lot of company all hands. I did a couple this morning where I speak to the all hands of a company. You just, every one of those little points, you're building advocates, you're building kind of fans. And then the fifth one, which I think is actually the most powerful for us, is really bringing your culture to your customers and your community. So as Barr knows, we're extremely values and purpose driven. We have one of our 5 values is what we call childlike joy, which means bring the kid in you to work every day. And so we've done all these like silly music videos with our customers and rap videos, all these things. And it really gets that human connection. And we talk about our whole kind of ethos as being human first business, bringing a very human approach to what we do. And so I think that element of like break the wall between your company culture and your customers, and then you'll drive this better community.
Childlike joy. We're going to ask you a little bit about that in a minute, but that's fantastic. And I also want to go a little deeper into Pulse. But Barr, curious to get your take that given that you were at Gainsight, now you're doing this yourself, and you've done a bunch on evangelizing, particularly, you know, since you haven't yet launched the company formally, of just evangelizing this problem space and market. What kinds of things are you doing? What's working well?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we started early on is actually the importance of language and bringing language and framing to a problem that sort of helps create that understanding in people's minds. And so I remember the very first time that we were testing out like data downtime. This was like, I sort of applied to speak at a conference and like by some miracle got accepted. And I was like, well, there's probably going to be me and like 3 people in the audience. And I was like getting so excited. I was like, okay, then I'll have like really deep discussions with them about data downtime. It's going to be awesome. And I remember like showing up, you know, like first time speaking about this topic. And there were maybe like 150 or something like that, people in the audience, a ton of engagement, people coming up to me after it saying like, you know, we feel like this is the beginning of a movement and like the words really resonated. And I was just like, whoa, like completely blown away. And I think a lot of that was because people really, like the pain is already there in a way, like the problem is already there, it's already happening. But the importance of language and kind of bringing that, I think helps a lot. So we thought a lot about language in the early days. And then, you know, couldn't emphasize enough sort of high quality content. So really from the beginning, we're trying to publish sort of as much sort of helpful content about this topic, at least like a few blog posts a week. And that's been incredibly helpful both for the company and for the category. We also do events that sort of bring people together. And even in this day and age, you know, like there's nothing like online wine tasting, you know, to break up the Zoom fatigue. So definitely, you know, a lot of sort of the tactics that Nick mentioned is something that you can do or can at least get a head start on earlier on.
And you've identified like chief data officer as a role that is gaining prominence in companies. And obviously these people are really busy, but it seems like you've done a great job engaging them. And I'm assuming it's not just, hey, I want to talk to you about Monte Carlo. It has to have a higher order purpose to get these folks as engaged as they seem to be with you. Can you talk a little bit about some of those efforts and what kinds of things you're doing in addition to the virtual wine tastings, or even what those are like?
Yeah, I think the chief data officer role is fascinating. And in many ways, actually, there are interesting parallels to seeing the evolution of the chief customer officer role. So, you know, like 5 or 10 years ago, there was very few chief data officers. Like there wasn't anyone at the company where you could really talk to that was responsible for data. But today, actually, interestingly, the chief data officer role has been increasingly important. And just as an anecdote for that, I think, you know, I saw kind of right after COVID-19 hit, this was like in March or something like that, when the CDC was basically like flooded with stuff. The very first role that they were hiring for was a chief data officer. Like they realized that they need, like in the midst of the breaking of the pandemic. And so I think, in a way, like this has also accelerated this role, and has also elevated its importance. So we're seeing more and more chief data officers reporting directly to the CEO, having more responsibility, sort of breaking out from kind of IT and other functions that they used to be, and actually increasing importance in the organization. And so, when you sort of have that background in mind, you start thinking about, okay, what does a chief data officer person care about? What do people in the data industry care about? Just like everyone else, they're looking for human connection. And so connecting with their peers and learning from their peers and, knowing like, okay, where are you in the journey, fellow chief data officer? Have you moved to the cloud or not already? How are you thinking about data for customer success or for marketing or for any other topic? And so, we spend a lot of time with our customers and with chief data officers, really understanding what's top of mind for them. And that really what drives kind of the content and events and everything that we're sort of focusing on.
And maybe,
go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, I mean, you referenced earlier that you've also had success with content, with written content. Your blogging has been unbelievable, and I think you've used LinkedIn really well as a channel, but it's really helped elevate the conversation around the company and around you personally. Can you share any tricks of the trade there? Because a lot of companies struggle with this. Like, how do I get a message out that's going to resonate with the right audience? What's the content? What's the channel? How involved do I personally become in this? You've really knocked that door down. I'm curious what lessons you can impart for others.
Yeah, no, I'm laughing because I have social media phobia, so I'm kind of ironic. But I mean, a few things that have helped, or at least a few things that we've focused on. One is having focus. So it was really clear to me that we're not going to win on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and everything. That's, we couldn't do all. And also for an early stage startup, you just can't do all of that. So we needed to make a bet on one or two platforms and go all in on them. And so, we did that with LinkedIn and with Medium to a certain degree, because there's lots of data practitioners on Medium. And so I think that was sort of the first kind of thing that we looked at. And then the second, I think in the early days, a lot of our blogging was just really our personal or sort of my personal experiences with this problem. I remember the pain. I still feel it, right? Being in sort of in the position of kind of the person responsible for data and, just being frustrated by things breaking and not having kind of a sense of what's going on and why. And we just talked about that pain, and just having that personal experience and bringing that to life has really helped. So that's been one source for the content. And then the second is we actually so every single week we get together as a team and we talk about what's top of mind for our customers right now. What are they struggling with? What's the big priorities for them? What is the one thing that's keeping them up at night? And we make sure to ask that in conversations with them, with prospects, whoever we meet. I'm what are you worried about? What's an article that you read recently? And so we're constantly thinking about okay, what's top of mind for people right now, and helping that. That's one thing. And then the second is actually collaborating with other people on blog posts. And so, we sort of found thought leaders that we were really excited about how they're thinking about the space. And honestly, just ask them, would you be interested in collaborating with us? And just made it easy for them. And we're sort of lucky to get some of those folks who were excited about this topic too. Honestly, I think it's very hard to start the category creation. On the other hand, when you find people who are excited about it, they're oh man, there's someone who's working about this problem. I'm so excited about it. So you have to find those people and that sort of fire and kind of try to light that up.
Very cool. And Nick, you talked about Pulse. I just wanted to ask a little bit more about that event, because clearly it's not called the Gainsight customer event. It's called Pulse. My recollection is you started it pretty early on in the company's life. A lot of companies that we're invested in, when we have this conversation about putting on some sort of event, it typically say, well, we're not quite big enough yet. We don't want to do something until we're, a little bit bigger. You obviously took a different tact, and it seems to have grown. I mean, if it seems to have really worked well for you. If the last one was 23,000 people, I think you said virtually, that's incredible. Just tell us a little bit about Pulse and how it's helped you in your efforts to create this category.
Absolutely, yeah. It definitely is a huge part of what we do. And you're right, Glenn. When we started it, we did it in May of 2013 the first time, and we launched in February 2013. And we talked about if we made it a customer event, it would just be depressing because we don't have any customers, so nobody would show up. Like a mom and like some friends or something. Like, so we basically said we have to make it an industry event by default. But the reason we knew we needed to do it is we were trying to convince people not about Gainsight. Honestly, the challenge in Gainsight is this much about convincing people about Gainsight and this much about convincing people about customer success in that order of magnitude. And it's convincing them why they need it, why it's important, why they should resource it, blah, blah, blah. That's my mission, right? And so what we made the conference all about is what are the best practices in customer success, and from the thought leaders over the years. And over time, many of those people that presented were customers, because now like pretty much everyone in customer success at some point uses Gainsight. But in the early days, it was just like people that we knew that were smart, very much like Barr was talking about with thought leaders. And so what we did was we picked topics that are very relevant to the job, not about Gainsight tech. So it wasn't about the 5 things you should look for in a customer success technology product, right? Whatever, like that's obviously just like thinly veiled marketing, right? It was, how much should a CSM get paid? How do you measure them? Should they have a quota? Do they report into sales? Same questions people wrestle with now, right? How do you handle your long tail of your customers? How do you do the handoff between sales and post sales, right? There's these questions that everyone asks. What's on their minds? That's what Barr said. That's what we did, was we made the agenda what's on their minds. We made the presenters people in the community that were thought leaders, that were CS leaders. We always sprinkled in an outside point of view. So we had investor panels, we had CEO panels, we had private equity panels, because people want to hear about the broader world of what's happening out there. And we always brought our childlike joy. We had, opening music videos and skits, and we had a Taylor Swift impersonator. We had Vanilla Ice for real one year, which was pretty awesome. So we always brought that kind of culture and personality. And really, when people leave Pulse, one of the biggest things they feel that consistently from the beginning to now is, we ask them what was valuable. They're like, oh, I got some great content, all that. But really, I felt like I'm not alone. I'm going through challenges other people are going through. And I think that's a huge part of community, is making people feel like they're not alone.
That's really powerful. Well, 23,000 later, they're definitely not alone.
They're not alone. And they still have that feeling, yeah.
So just a couple other questions before we wrap up. Obviously, the more successful you are creating a category, the more likely you are to engender some competition.
Yeah.
Maybe it's almost like a sign of success when you see, people start to emulate what you're doing and come into your market. I'm curious, maybe start with you, Nick. You've probably seen some competition come in. How much time and energy do you spend internally kind of focusing on the competition? Do you kind of welcome them with open arms to help validate the category? Do you try to squash them and kill them as fast as you can? Or just curious how what your orientation is towards that competition.
Yeah, it's funny. Jeff Bezos has that thing of, we're not competitor obsessed, we're customer obsessed. And then you read I read Everything Store, the book about Amazon, and they were seriously customer obsessed. So what they say, what they do is different. I think yes, like it's funny. There have been 5 waves of venture funded startups, like 2 or 3 at a time. That were all the next gen Gainsight. There was a wave in 2013, right when we were getting started. There was a wave in like 2014, 2015. Barr was there. There was always like the next generation Gainsight, always. And there always will be. And by the way, there's your talented entrepreneurs. We take every one of them seriously. The reality is that I think what we try to do is we try to stay extremely customer focused, but also want to make sure that we keep building the best stuff and delivering the best service and learning from everyone out there. So we really try to understand, who are the latest competitors out there. We want to be paranoid about it in a healthy way. We want to understand what customers are saying. One thing we do extremely diligently is tons and tons of customer interviews. We have a firm we use that calls our customers, every win, or not most wins. Now we have too many deals to call everyone, but a sample of wins, every churn, every competitive loss, and then a sample of deals that just kind of like went dark or didn't go anywhere. And they call, it's actually run by a former employee of ours, and they call, they give us this detailed interview of like what they said, and we learn, and I personally read every single one of those, and I read every online review about Gainsight, and I read every NPS survey, and we are obsessed about our customers, but inherently by being obsessed about our customers, we learn about the competition too, and then we just need to be better. So I just tell our team, like, we don't hide anything. Like, I tell the team, everything's on the web. Don't like cloak things behind a password. Our community, you can check it out. Let's just be better. Like, all the time, be better. That's our job. Just be better.
Just be better. Barr, like, how about you? You know, it's still early days, but are you thinking about, like, you know, is part of your calculus about how you're building your product, how you're thinking about taking it to market? Are you thinking about the competition that's going to come, or is that not really part of the calculus yet?
Yeah, I think you know, in the early days, like, the market is pretty much greenfield. And so a lot more of the focus is on customers, and there's some validation and competitors and all that. I think definitely, so definitely our focus is way more on customers, and customers know the answers, right? Like, that's sort of where the truth is. And so, you know, I think to a certain degree, if you kind of do that, then, like, you know, there's this book, The Score Takes Care of Itself, right? And so
one of my favorites.
Yeah, so you kind of like focus on the things that you believe in and that matter, like, you know, the rest will take care of itself. And I very much believe in that. So I think that's been our kind of main focus. I will say, you know, I would add to Nick, like, be better. I definitely agree with that. And just to build on that, like, I think as an early stage startup, one of the biggest assets that you have is time. And so one of our values is measuring minutes, which means, like, you know, we can sort of, our unit of success is not years, it's not months, it's weeks, it's minutes. And for an early stage startup, like, how fast you move is really all that matters, in my opinion. And so we need to be better, faster. And I think that's sort of our strategy.
Like that.
Awesome. Another question I want to ask you guys, you know, as you're building out your companies, I think you're both taking diversity, equity, and inclusion really seriously. And I'm curious what you see the benefits of that are, both within your company and driving, you know, DE&I into your community, into the communities you're building. Nick, maybe some thoughts there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that with DEI, it's important to think about it both of, like, why you care about it and why it's good for your business. So for us, it's like our human first concept of our culture. It depends on equality, you know, diversity, inclusion. So it sort of has to be part of what we do as a fundamental. It also, of course, helps your business. Our customers are diverse. They want to see people like them in our employee base. We've gotten feedback from our customers about appreciating diversity, and so it definitely helps the business. But I'd say for us, it's just like existential. And I think on doing it, the thing I've learned is it is just a constant journey, and you have to be comfortable that you're not anywhere close to done. We have some things that we do moderately well. I think there's a much bigger list of things we don't do well that we need to do better at. And I think people think of it as something that you can just check a box and you're done. And I think that's the wrong attitude. I tell people, you need to think of it like sales or product. Like, are you ever done with your product? Are you ever done with sales? No. Just suit up and do the hard work. It's important. And so don't feel like this is something else, but we're so good at X. It's like, yeah, you might be good at X. Like, we have reasonably good gender diversity at Gainsight, although it's still, I think we can do better. And we have terrible diversity in lots of other fronts that we need to improve on, right? And so I think it's just constantly be willing to say, this is an important priority that we're going to always have. It's not like the thing of the moment, which is the danger for a lot of these programs.
Or how about you, as you know, you're early on in both building your company and the community around it. How do you ensure you kind of build the right first principles in now, so that it's not a problem that emerges later?
Yeah, I love what Nick said. And, you know, kind of like an never-ending journey that you always need to think about. I think for me, it's also very personal. Like, one of the motivators for starting a company was to, you know, to change that, or to change how, you know, what the world is like. And so, you know, I'm excited about having more sort of women, and generally more diverse audience in startups and in tech and founding companies. So it is definitely personal. And also, when we're kind of building the company, we also make it very tactical. So in everything that we do, like in what our website looks like, in the language that we use, how we write the blog post, the pictures that we use, the people that we hire, like everything that we do tactically also needs to reflect that. And then more broadly, I think, when you're creating a category, you also have a responsibility for the community to do it right. It's not just you or just your company, it's the industry as a whole. And I'm actually really excited about the data industry. And I think in a way, the data industry is really poised to help sort of, make really sort of a increased emphasis on this. I think there's more and more diversity in data, and we're seeing more and more of that focus. And so I'm really excited actually to be doing this in the data industry in particular.
Yeah, that's a point I just want to double click on, which is you have an opportunity to impact diversity in the community. And like, as an example, we just launched an internship program to bring underrepresented minorities into customer success, into our customers, and we're kind of doing the training and funding and all that kind of stuff. And so you can impact people beyond your four walls, so to speak.
That's great to hear that you're doing that. And with that, I'm going to put you both on the hot seat. We're going to have a couple of just quick questions to wrap today. So I'll ask a question and just say the first thing that comes to mind. Barr, what's one thing you've learned from Nick on on category creation?
How to dress for success. I'm only half kidding. No, but I think I learned from Nick that it's possible. Like, creating a category is hard. It requires hustle and belief and courage, but you got to go in there, put yourself in the arena, and do it. Like, it is possible.
All right. So sort of get the right jersey. Maybe we need Monte Carlo jerseys, and then get in the ring.
Exactly.
And think quantum physics, not classical physics. Okay, Nick, what's one thing you've learned from Barr that's been helpful to you?
Barr was a verb at Gainsight. It's the verb defined as somebody who can jump into an impossibly complicated situation where everyone's frustrated and everything's not working, and with complete calm and poise, solve the problem. So I learned how to bar things. That's what we learned.
To bar things. All right. Barr, last question. What's the craziest hairstyle or outfit you saw from Nick in your years at Gainsight?
There's been some crazy ones. The one that I really liked just comes to mind was, I think this was like a hot pink blazer, hot orange sneakers, and an RBG shirt, like huge RBG shirt. Really. All right.
That's some good attention.
A good childlike joy moment, sounds like. Well, guys, this has been an amazing hour of lots of knowledge share. I think people are going to love it. And just a reminder for the participants, you will get a follow-up email from us that will include links to get the book from Nick and Barr as well. And so hope you enjoy those. And I'd just like to, on behalf of everybody listening, thank you, Barr, thank you, Nick, for imparting such wisdom on us. It was an absolutely fantastic session. Thank you so much.
Awesome being here.